To start, at a glance, we'll just be discussing what is the I-94, CBP land entry issues, provisional I-94s and Form I-9 connections, alien registration risk, how to fix an I-94 error, EAD workers, E-Verify, ICE audits, and best practices. How are you sure your workers have been properly admitted? Is your I-9 process compliant and audit ready? Let's explore the growing risks facing employers and how to prevent costly mistakes. An I-94 arrival departure record is an official record issued by the CBP. It can be extended inside the US through USCIS, and it essentially confirms the date of entry, the visa classification, and length of authorized stay. For work visas, the length or authorized stay equals length of work authorization. The I-94 always overrides the visa for determining authorized presence. The visa is only a travel document that allows the holder to enter the US. And an I-94 is available online after entry via land or air. The I-94 is essential for completing Form I-9 and for verifying immigration status throughout the stay. Some common CBP land entry issues, for example, many TN and H2 workers are entering by land without being issued an I-94. The CBP often skips this step at land ports of entry, and they'll update travel history, but they won't issue a new I-94 record. In that case, we contact CBP to fix the issue, which only works for air entries and can take several weeks. For land entry, the employee will need to exit and re-enter the US to ensure an I-94 is generated. A solution to this is to re-enter with a provisional I-94 or take proactive legal steps. A provisional I-94 is or can be requested prior to land travel. You have to pay a $6 USD fee, submit information online, and up to 7 days before planned re-entry because it expires after 7 days. And it must be printed and presented at the border. A provisional I-94 avoids entry issues and ensures proper documentation for Form I-9s. And then in order to navigate this, we show that an I-94 serves as primary proof of legal admission for I-9 compliance. Without it, the I-9 may be invalid or incomplete. Employers must ensure an employee's I-94 is up to date and in the correct visa classification. A visa stamp is not enough to verify lawful presence. A visa stamp is just a travel document that allows the holder to enter the US. So we always recommend to keep a copy of the latest I-94 in the employee file. Alien registration requirements and risks. Under the Trump administration, it now requires that non-US citizens in the US aged 14 and older residing in the US for 30 days or more must register with immigration authorities and carry proof of registration. The Form I-94 serves as evidence of an individual's lawful admission to the US and proof of registration. If an employee is unable to present proper documentation, such as a valid I-94 visa or EAD card, individuals could face fines up to $5,000 per violation, and they could also be subject to imprisonment of up to 30 days and/or removal proceedings. This applies to both visa holders and certain EAD holders, especially if they entered the US by land and didn't receive an I-94. How to fix an I-94 error and what's at stake. Review the I-94 after every entry, especially by land. If it's incorrect, visit a CBP deferred inspection site or contact our legal team to request assistance with a correction. If a worker's USCIS extension is pending, they should not travel. No. Exit and re-enter may be required in some cases where CBP cannot update the I-94 record. And an additional note, CBP deferred inspection sites can be found on the website, but you can always contact your legal team and we can help you find one closest to you. ICE audits can target any worker category, including domestic hires. Even US-based workers with a valid employment authorization document must comply with I-9 requirements, and in some cases, maintain valid I-94 records. ICE audits and E-Verify checks can apply to any employee category, including domestic hires with work authorization. Employers should verify documents thoroughly during onboarding, keep copies of current I-94s when applicable, and monitor expiration dates and re-verify work authorization when required. ICE and additional notes are that not all EAD holders rely on the I-94. It's especially relevant for individuals under humanitarian parole, temporary protected status, or an asylum or refugee status. In these cases, the I-94 may serve as proof of lawful entry or continued presence and may be needed to satisfy I-9 compliance. E-Verify. Key facts. E-Verify verifies identity and work authorization of new hires. It does not replace Form I-9. It's used after the I-9 completion. It's voluntary for most employers, but mandatory for federal contractors and for certain states such as Florida and Arizona or certain industries. E-Verify will not catch all errors or fraud. It's just a tool and it's not a guarantee. We use it to re-verify separately if work authorization has a known expiration. And internal audits are recommended to ensure compliance. And in this case, our firm can assist. Not all EAD holders are automatically verified. It depends on the status and document type. And if you have a question about a certain worker or just the process, you're always allowed to ask our team and we'll help get you answers. With an emergence of different types of ICE audits, audits can result in fines and civil penalties, program disqualification, specifically for H-2s, and reputational damage. Violations here for ICE audits will be different than what appears for DOL. And in any case, these are avoidable with proactive legal review and documentation protocols. The best practices we recommend for employers is to collect updated I-94s upon every employee entry, track expiration dates and set calendar reminders, train human resources and onboarding staff on compliance essentials, contact legal counsel for extensions, corrections, or audits, and being proactive, avoiding fines, interruptions, and delays. Thank you for joining us.
Finally, we got one question in the chat. They asked, should we be telling all our incoming employees to request a provisional I-94?
So the provisional I-94 it's typically recommended when we have a certain issue. For example, when we know that a worker has entered by land, we typically see that they don't receive an I-94 generated in the system. So for example, if they have a bus transportation or they use a train into the US, they're likely not to get an I-94. That's when a provisional I-94 comes into place. So it's not going to apply to every worker. It could apply to a host of domestic travelers, or not domestic, land travelers. But in any case, I would recommend either seeing if the worker has the I-94 or asking your legal team where you can find the I-94 to see if it's in the system. And if it's not in the system, then we go in to prepare for a provisional I-94.
Thank you, Annalyn. Aisha, if you have any other questions, feel free to send any follow-ups. Kairi is asking, morning, we're seeing that Customs is asking for additional documentation when our employees are returning from vacation and coming back into the country. They have their I-94s and visas. What is your suggestion on this? Or have you seen this happening more often?
We have been seeing different types of documents being requested, all of them within the legal framework, but also different than what we've expected in the past, right? Just like you're commenting. In that case, we always recommend complying with the government agency. So if CBP is asking for immigration documents and maybe proof of travel itinerary, for example, we recommend applying those and kind of being prepared. And even if you let the legal team know, we can start kind of tracking a trend like this because sometimes announcements aren't made where we can't proactively help you prepare. So the best course of action is when you receive guidance from a CBP officer to listen to them and provide them what you have. And if you don't have it, always feel free to tell them that that's not available and what you can provide instead.
Perfect. Now, Amy's asking, how often should I ask for a copy of the employee's I-94?
You want to ask every time they enter the US because an I-94 essentially that will carry your worker and their immigration status throughout their stay here in the US. An I-94 is essentially the most important immigration document for the worker and concurrently is an important document for you as an employer for compliance I-9 reasons. So every time you have a worker arrive to the US, you can ask them for a copy of their I-94. We can also send you a link so you know where to access an I-94. There's a website where you can include the worker's name and passport number and it generates the I-94. That's also the same system we see or check with in order to see if they were issued an I-94 in the first place. So there's definitely a recommendation to ask each worker every time they arrive. And then on top of it, there's ways for all of us, legal employer alike, to monitor I-94s along with the workers since they don't receive a physical copy.
When you print it from the website, it's also going to tell you the date and the time when it was generated. So this could help you ensure that it is the most updated one. And it also is going to tell you the last day they entered the US. And this can be by accident change or by mistake of the CBP officer. So you have to ensure that it was not shortened either.
Exactly. And going further along with Deanna's point, checking it as soon as your worker arrives to the work site or to the to their work performance allows you to make sure that any errors can be caught sooner rather than later, especially if you intend for that worker to transfer within the US.
Perfect. So the next question is for Kailina. Will it be possible to get a copy of the presentation for reference purposes?
Yes, of course. I believe our team can facilitate that for you, of course.
Now, Katie's asking, have you seen more errors on I-94s this year? We have seen an influx of these errors and have had to call and get them adjusted.
I've heard of few more errors on the H2 team. I believe our TN and IB team may have a different experience. It's always going to kind of vary, I think, but I have seen a few more errors this year. There's also been a prolonged time to process corrections. So it's definitely something we want to stay proactive about and request any modifications or even request the worker to exit and re-enter if necessary as soon as possible, because I know sometimes time is of necessity and we want to make sure these workers have the corrected I-94s.
I can speak in regards of the TN and the IB team as their team manager, but please note, I'm not an attorney. We have seen that they have been making more mistakes. They can even add more time or shorten the time, but we need to ensure that they're still under compliance, which for TN is only 3 years from their first arrival. This often happens during peak season. So you will see it more during the summer, during high season in H2, or even during winter time, during Christmas, because they have a lot of work and they just don't pay like enough attention to the influx of people coming, but it should be easily fixed, especially if they arrive by flight. Perfect. Now, Jocelyn is asking, is it currently recommended that workers carry proof of their I-94 and/or visa alongside U.S. documentation if they have any?
Proof of I-94 and visa, yes. So typically when we have any worker come into the US and they're reporting to their job site, sometimes they're CDL drivers or sometimes they're traveling to further work sites just to complete their job contract. We always want them to carry all their immigration documents, and that includes the approval notice and the I-94. You'll always receive a copy of the approval notices from your legal team. And then on top of that, an I-94 is accessible to you and us as legal through a link. And we're happy to, again, share that once you contact your legal team. But we definitely recommend taking scanned copies of all those documents. The worker doesn't necessarily need to feel so burdened by carrying the original documents. I know that sometimes it's unrealistic to carry a passport with the visa stamp. So even just a signed or scanned copy sometimes helps the worker feel calmer when they're traveling inside the US.
Thank you. Now, Aisha's mentioning that she has noticed that the I-94 for H-2Bs USCIS extensions have listed a 30-day grace period. AI visa and date is 11/15, well, November 15, but the I-94 on the I-797A states admission until December 15. How does this impact work authorization?
Yeah, great question, Asia. So for H2s, it's a bit specific to the work contract. So for example, let's say you have a H2 job order and the job ends on November 30th. The job effectively is complete on November 30th. However, the grace period allows the worker to stay in the US, be lawfully present to either seek a transfer to a different H2B job order or to arrange travel outside the US. So the grace period beyond the end of an employment contract simply allows a legal protection to the worker to stay in the US and look for alternative jobs or to travel and make those decisions with their employer. It doesn't necessarily grant your work job order to be extended until that December date. I hope that makes sense.
If you have any follow-up questions, Aisha, feel free to comment and I'll make sure to monitor. In the meantime, I don't see any other questions, so feel free to send them our way and we'll ensure to answer them for you. For my TN people who might have some TN working under your company, something that you also have to monitor is that sometimes the I-94 can be shortened because of the passport expiration. So it will be issued to match the passport expiration instead of the 3 years, because they cannot be in the US further than their passport.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Deanna, and thank you everyone for attending. Just like they said, feel free to reach out for any questions to your legal team and this intake@farmerenterprises.com email address. We'll make sure your questions get answered. Thank you, and have a great day, everyone.